Master Mu, and this is Art is the Church of God the Creator, where we say that with a smile, but we say it. We actually say it. We say it out loud because we believe it and we're not embarrassed about that. And today we're going to have a live read-along. And for those of you who are wondering what's going on, the concept of these intermittent read-alongs is that we're sort of looking at famous classics of literature that are probably in everyone's libraries or available on PDFs online, and we're reading it together collectively. So we're practicing sort of social public speaking, and we're observing. We're not just reading the words on the page, but we're observing how we feel physically when we are breathing and articulating the words, and we're experiencing a kind of a rhythmic articulation of feeling, as my teacher, Allen Ginsberg, would have said. And today we're going to focus on the work of the great and legendary Samuel Beckett. Now, I'm not going to read a biography from Wikipedia. You can do that. But Samuel Beckett is the reason this is a tribute to Samuel Beckett, and here we're reading from the Grove edition here. I'll hold it up to the camera, okay, of his three novels. But we're giving a tribute to Samuel Beckett because this season here in New York on Broadway are three concurrent productions of three great plays by Samuel Beckett. Craps Less, Tape, Endgame, and the big one on Broadway, Waiting for Godot. And Waiting for Godot has gotten the most press. It's running right now through January 4th, and I think at the Forum Theater, and it stars the famous Hollywood and TV actor Keanu Reeves and his famous partner Alec Winters, with whom he co-starred many years ago in the films, the Bill and Ted films, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures, and their various sequels. So it's a bit of a meta nostalgia trip, sort of the two flaneurs, sort of like lost in time and space, in this case, in their search for God. And their production on Broadway, interestingly, they pronounce the name Godot, G-O-D-O-T, with an accent on the first syllable, Waiting for Godot, like with an emphasis on God, as opposed to perhaps a more francophone pronunciation. And so we're going to be reading from the Grove edition of his third and final novel of his great trilogy from 1959, The Unnameable. And the Waiting for Godot was written as a kind of an intermezzo between the second and third novels. These are three novels, three sort of a continuous narrative: Molloy, Malone Dies, The Unnameable. And they were composed originally in French, so Molloy, Malomel, and L'Innommable. And already you hear just in the titles in French this tremendously poetic wordplay, from sort of the open vowel Molloy, to this sort of the more nasalized and sort of swallowed sounds of L'Innommable. Sort of it agglutinizes and comes to a kind of a point of stasis. And this subject of stasis is really the central subject matter of the final novel. We're not going to read it all because it's 150 pages. We're just going to read first two paragraphs and the final paragraphs, and I'll let you know when we're making that transition. And you can download a PDF, or you can I'll refer to the page numbers in the Grove edition paperback right here, which is sort of like the classic that most people got to know it with. And for those of you who are not familiar with the work of Samuel Beckett, his theater is often grouped with, the so-called absurdist, theater of the absurd, which is basically the existentialist, philosophically inflected theater of the 1950s and 60s, which drew upon earlier experimental theater traditions of Dada, like Alfred Jarry, and surrealist theater and so on. And what distinguishes the work of Samuel Beckett in particular is his deep engagement with philosophy and metaphysics. And so in the I'm not going to summarize the entire trilogy, but the central figure, Molloy, of the trilogy, Molloy, Malone Dies and the Unnameable, is someone who is aware of the fact that he's dying and who is sort of looking over his life, which is not a distinguished life. He's a low life character, and he's living in some like essentially like a publicly funded nursing home or hospital, and he's sort of losing his bodily functions. And so there's a lot of black humor in that, and in the as it progresses, the sort of the journey towards death of Molloy, it's originally in the first novel, there's an embedded narrative of searching for his mother, which is like, obviously searching for origins, which is presented in kind of black humor and sort of Oedipal terms. In Malone Dies, there's the character bifurcates into he's writing a story in these notebooks, and he splits into two characters, one of whom is a detective who is investigating him for murders, unsolved murders. So it becomes a kind of a existential murder mystery, and there's a surprise twist in Malone Dies where the investigator undergoes a kind of a mental breakdown, and then we realize that actually he's institutionalized and that he is the murderer himself. He is Malone, and he's, all right. But in the final novel, all of these Molloy, Malone, and, all of these other sort of characters are in a limbo-like state. And so depending upon your reading, your interpretation, either the protagonist is dead and in an afterlife. So there's an afterlife interpretation where essentially this is a ghost story and we're hearing the narration from an afterlife, and it's unclear whether it is more of a Dantean purgatory or limbo or even a hell. It's definitely not paradiso. There are definitely Dantean overtones if you take a religious. So one valid interpretation of the text is this literary poetic description of the afterlife, which would be a Dantean interpretation. A secularist interpretation, which I would prefer, is that the primary character is essentially in a coma or has had a stroke and is experiencing a type of profound amnesia and is not able to recall any specific details from his life, and is just having a series of dreamlike episodes which seem to be dreamlike sort of nightmarish evocations of his previous existence, but in which there's no visual stimulus. There's he's not seeing anything, his eyes are closed, and so there are just sort of occasional wisps of visual imagery which sort of goes in and out of a dreamlike state, which is a kind of perhaps a nihilistic rewriting of the very full dream states depicted by the central figure of Finnegan's Wake, Humphrey Chimpton Earwicker, or whoever you wanted to call him. All right, because in life, Samuel Beckett was the protege and the almost son-in-law to be of James Joyce. So he was a protege and a auxiliary family member of James Joyce, and he very much worshipped and admired James Joyce and wanted to be a successor. And Beckett's early novels tried to imitate Joyce's completely cosmic level of reference and vocabulary and all of that. And the only way this led to a kind of an artistic crisis for Beckett, and the only way he could move forward was to pare down his materials radically, and in so doing created what I consider to be the purely metaphysical novel. I think he moved to a place beyond Joyce, which is Joyce is in his greatest work, which for me is Finnegan's Wake, is an archetypal, a Jungian book of all books. I mean, from my perspective, and we'll talk about Joyce some other time, like on Bloomsday when we'll read Ulysses. But I feel that Joyce methodically conquered each domain of fiction. He started with short fiction until he wrote the perfect short story with the dead, and then he focused on the novella until he could write the perfect novella, The Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, and then to the large novel in the sort of the 19th century novel, which he sort of expanded in 20th century modernism with Ulysses, and so he wrote the great novel, and then finally at the end of his career, set about writing the beyond the greatest novel, Ulysses, thus the book of books, the greatest books. And Finnegan's Wake is the book of books in the sense that it's written simultaneously in every language and every archetype, and is presenting an archetypal family history that is, the family of humanity, beginning in the Adam and Eve's, sort of the archetypal husband and wife, and then their children, and then it expands to the family of all humanity. So it's an astounding achievement, but Beckett realized he could never approach that. So he radically reduced his all of the elements. He keeps some of the philosophical vocabulary, which we'll mention briefly, but he removes any type of continuous narrative plot or depiction of an external world whatsoever. So it's a dream state without specific imagery. Now, what makes it a metaphysical novel, and I don't think it's the first metaphysical novel, but I think it's the greatest metaphysical novel, The Unnameable, is that there is both an unreliable narrator placed in an unspecified place. So both the narrator is destabilized, both the the speaker, and so both the subject is destabilized and the object, whatever the speaker is perceiving, is also destabilized. So Beckett uses a variety of rhetorical strategies to destabilize both the subjectivity of the speaker and the objectivity of the outside world. And this double move, this double undermining of subjectivity and objectivity is this extraordinary achievement of kind of a non-dual nihilism, perhaps, if you view it in those terms. And so I just think it is the great post-war novel. I don't think anything else written in English or European post-war literature comes close to the greatness of The Unnameable. And his drama is fantastic. I love Waiting for Godot. I love Krapp's Last Tape, Endgame. They're very funny, and bleakly funny. I mean, it's black humor. And I attended a talk that Beckett gave shortly before, when he was on Broadway many years ago, and he was being interviewed, and the subject of why his situations he depicts are always so bleak, and he said, he said with a smile on his face, he said, well, nothing is funnier than unhappiness. And I laughed, and everyone in the audience laughed. Nothing is funnier than unhappiness. It was kind of an embarrassed laugh, because it seemed to be an expression of Schadenfreude. But then he followed that apparently mean-spirited joke, You know, again, a kind of example of his Irish, Northern Irish. He was born and raised in Belfast. Northern Irish Protestant existentialist, French resistance, black humor. Keep in mind that he survived just, in the French underground all throughout the 40s as an expatriate, as a stateless person. I mean, he had a very precarious existence up until he achieved some fame later in life with the plays with Waiting for Godot, and then, these novels have never been read. But he followed up that statement, nothing is funnier than happiness, with a serious aside. He said, nothing is more real than nothing. And for me, let's just say that together. Nothing is more real than nothing. I think this is sort of the central axiom of Beckett's worldview, is that he's looking at non-existence and how can we perceive non-existence from an existence subjective standpoint. And his philosophical strategy is that we must undermine both the subjectivity of the first person speaker and the objectivity of that which is seen, that which is spoken about. Both the speaker and that which is spoken about must be simultaneously undermined. And how does he do that? He does that by taking a stance of radical philosophical skepticism, Pyrrhonian skepticism or empirical skepticism of Sextus Empiricus, which is that he operates through negation. He proceeds through a negative dialectic of making a tentative hypothesis and then immediately negating it, and then by establishing aporias, gaps, and establishing and taking an affectic attitude, a wait and see attitude, and so when he speaks of aporia, those are gaps, meaning that which cannot be seen or heard, right? And therefore that which cannot be judged, and then the affectic, refraining from making judgments until this, and then this process of a negative dialectic. So that by introduction. Again, it's really worthwhile to read this in French. The French is quite different from the English. I think they're both very poetic. Since I'm a native English speaker, I'll read it in English. If you are bilingual and you can read it in a bilingual edition, French and English, it's very instructive to see how he rewrote the French, which includes a lot of specifically Francophone wordplay, into I think a richer English text, which has also magnificent English wordplay, neologism, invented words, phonetic sounds. Again, he's using the whole armamentarium of techniques that he learned from James Joyce, but presenting them in a radically different context. He's not inviting you to join into his cosmic dream, as Joyce was in Finnegan's Wake, but he's asking you to undermine yourself as the dreamer. Yes. And all right, that being said, let's open up our Grove edition here of The Unnameable to page 291 and just read the first two paragraphs before the secondary characters are introduced. And so let's just get into it, and then we will pause and then go to the conclusion, page 128. Okay. The Unnameable. Where now? Who now? When now? Unquestioning. I say I. Unbelieving. Questions. Hypotheses. Call them that. Keep going, going on. Call that going. Call that on. Can it be that one day off it goes on, that one day I simply stayed in where, instead of going out in the old way, out to spend day and night as far away as possible? It wasn't far. Perhaps that is how it began. You think you are simply resting, the better to act when the time comes, or for no reason. and you soon find yourself powerless ever to do anything again, no matter how it happened. It, say it, not knowing what. Perhaps I simply assented at last to an old thing. But I did nothing. I seem to speak. It is not I, about me. It is not about me. These few general remarks to begin with. What am I to do? What shall I do? What should I do in my situation? How proceed? By aporia, pure and simple? Or by affirmations and negations, invalidated as uttered, or sooner or later? Generally speaking, there must be other shifts. Otherwise, it would be quite hopeless. But it is quite hopeless. I should mention before going any further on, that I say aporia without knowing what it means. Can one be effectic otherwise than unawares? I don't know. With the yeses and nos, it is different. They will come back to me as I go along and howl like a bird to shit on them all without exception. The fact would seem to be, if in my situation, one may speak of facts, not only that I shall have to speak of things of which I cannot speak, but also, which is even more interesting, but also that I, which if it is possible, even more interesting, that I shall have to, I forget, no matter, and at the same time I am obliged to speak. I shall never be silent. Never. I shall not be alone. In the beginning, I am, of course, alone. Alone. That is soon said. Things have to be soon said. And how can one be sure in such darkness? I shall have company. In the beginning. A few puppets. Then I'll scatter them to the winds if I can. And things, what is the correct attitude to adopt towards things? And to begin with, are they necessary? What a question. But I have a few illusions. Things are to be expected. The best is not to decide anything in this connection in advance. If a thing turns up, for some reason or another, take it into consideration. Where there are people, it is said, there are things. Does this mean that when you admit the former, you must also admit the latter? Time will tell. The thing to avoid, I don't know why, is the spirit of system. People with things, people without things, things without people. What does it matter? I flatter myself, it will not take me long to scatter them. Whenever I choose, to the winds. I don't see how. The best would be not to begin. But I have to begin. That is to say, I have to go on. Perhaps in the end I shall smother in a throng. Incessant comings and goings, the crush and bustle of a bargain sale. No danger of that. Okay, let's draw our first line there, these first two paragraphs. This is the introduction to his narrative, and he establishes that he's unsure of what he's speaking of. And again, he says how to proceed, by aporia, pure and simple, or by affirmations and negations invalidated as uttered, as sooner or later. So again, in Greek philosophy, aporia is just a gap or lack of information, sort of like, a blank tape or like a blank page, right? Says, or by affirmations and negations invalidated as uttered sooner or later. Again, this sort of negative sort of quadrilemma, not this, not that, right? And so double negation. And he says there must be other shifts, and he says that when I say aporia without knowing what it means, of course, if there's no stable subject, then how can there be a definite awareness of aporia or of information that's missing if you don't know what the context is? He says, can one be affectic otherwise than unawares? I don't know. Can one be affectic? In other words, can one have a wait-and-see attitude? The only way that you can have a wait-and-see attitude is when you don't know, when you're unaware of the larger situation. All right? So, as opposed to, as he says, the yeses and the nos, definite affirmations or definite negations. And he says he will shit on all of them without exception. All right? And then underneath all of this, at the same time, he says, I am obliged to speak. I shall never be silent, never. So underneath this sort of philosophical sort of double negation is a compulsion to speak. I shall never be silent, never. Yeah. And so utterance. So what is this? The central thesis of this novel is, what is utterance when there is not a clear subject and not a clear object? And he advances that in the second paragraph when it says here, where there are people, it is said there are things. In other words, when there is subjectivity implies objectivity. Does this mean that when you admit the former, you admit the latter? Time will tell, But is that in fact true? Is there actual subjectivity and actual objectivity? Again, time will tell. That's the effectic attitude, right? And he says the thing to avoid is the spirit of system. Okay, so again, he's speaking philosophically when he says people with things, people without things, things without people. He's lampooning the sort of the metaphysical systemizations of the scholastic philosophers like Thomas Aquinas and so on and so forth, and Duns Scotus, and sort of the ontological speculations of academic philosophy, going straight up through the accidentalism of Descartes and Goelings, and so he's looking at the history of philosophy and saying that he's going to try to present his non-dual, non-subjectivity, non-objectivity in a non-systematic way. And in the courses of that, there will be images, there will be people and things, but that he will scatter them to the winds. And then we're going to sort of skip ahead to the end here, because that begins the main body of the novel, where he introduces his puppets, his people and things, which are taken from the two earlier novels, Malone, Malloy, and then he introduces other characters, Mercier, Camier. He basically goes over his entire previous oeuvre and sort of deconstructs it one by one. And then he introduces new characters who are similar to Malloy. There's a character introduced as Basil, who then is renamed Mahood, and then Mahood morphs into two characters, Mahood and Worm, and depending on your interpretation of the metaphorical structure here, they either represent theological entities such as God the Father and God the Son, or perhaps they are all representations of himself, or you may view it in a more negative light, that he's in Dantean infernal state, and that these are demonic presences or satanic presences. That all depends upon your interpretation. I really think that those are all valid interpretations of the central narrative. At the end of the novel, and we're going to skip ahead now to in the PDF, if you're reading from a PDF on page 128 of the PDF, but if we're reading from the text from the Grove edition, page 407, we're from the middle of page 407, and the PDF, the bottom of page 128. In the final section of the novel, the subplots are all finished, are all played out. The reminiscences of he has various sort of grotesque, dreamlike images of a previous life as a limbless creature, as a sort of an ovoid creature, as a sort of a brain in a bottle, and these are all sort of tentative hypotheses of his current sort of perhaps comatose state of amnesia, or sort of a state of perhaps, or if he's living, or his bardo-like state if he's dead. We could also relate this to the Buddhist teachings of the Sukhavati and the bardo, and the idea of the disembodied, the spirit of the person existing in a post-living but still continuing state of consciousness without any specific memory. If we're thinking of the Dantean intertext, there's the idea of the waters of Lethe, which the idea that when you pass through the underworld that you drink the water of Lethe and you forget everything. So this might be a depiction of the afterlife spirit who has forgotten the previous life but who has not moved on to another life. In this final section, there are no other details. He's just the central narrator is now speaking in fragments. What we read in the beginning was were complete sentences. Now we just have a poetic series of sentence fragments, which are very poetic, both in the French and the English, and the only imagery here at the end is simply the silence and the door, and the voice which continues to the very end, into the silence until the door that opens, until the silence. I'm going to read it from page 128. This is also a tribute to the great playwright, not only to the theatrical work of Samuel Beckett, who's on Broadway right now with, I said, with Waiting for Godot, Crab's Last Tape, and Endgame, but also to his great English language disciple, Harold Pinter. Harold Pinter, I heard read this final section, most of this final. I'm going to read a little bit more than Harold read, but I remember he read it out loud on stage at the 92nd Street Y when I was a kid, and it was thrilling. But I'm not going to imitate Harold Pinter's mode of reading. He read it with a tremendous sense of anxiety or something like that. For me, it's more contemplative. For me, the silence is more of, I relate it more to my experience of silence and meditation. So, as we read this together, experience your breath, take short breaths at every comma, and ask yourself, what is your emotional response to these words? Are you experiencing it a state of heightened anxiety, as suggested by Harold Pinter's reading, or are you experiencing it as a kind of a mantra recitation? That will depend upon you. But let's read this together. Bottom of page 128, the sentence beginning the silence. Okay, let's go. Okay, let's begin now. The silence. Speak of the silence before going into it. Was I there already? I don't know. At every instant, I'm there. Listen to me speaking of it. I knew it would come. I emerge from it to speak of it. I stay in it to speak of it. If it's I who speak, and it's not, I act as if it were. Sometimes I act as if it were, but at length, was I ever there at length, a long stay? I understand nothing about duration. I can't speak of it. Oh, I know I speak of it. I say never and ever. I speak of the four seasons and the different parts of the day and night. The night has no parts. That's because you are asleep. The seasons must be very similar. Perhaps it's springtime now. That's all words they taught me without making their meaning clear to me. That's how I learned to reason. I used them all the words they showed me. There were columns of them. Oh, the strange glow all of a sudden. They were on lists with images opposite. I must have forgotten them. I must have mixed them up. These nameless images I have, these imageless names, these windows, I should perhaps rather call doors, at least by some other name. And this word, man, which is perhaps not the right one for the thing I see when I hear it, but an instant, an hour, and so on. How can they be represented? A life. How could they be made clear to me here in the dark? I call that the dark. Perhaps it's azure. blank words, but I use them. They keep coming back. All those they showed me, all those I remember. I need them all to be able to go on. It's a lie. A score would be plenty, tried and trusty, unforgettable, nicely varied. That would be palette enough. I'd mix them, I'd vary them. That would be gamut enough. All the things I'd do if I could, if I wished, if I could wish. No need to wish. That's how it will end, in heart-rending cries, inarticulate murmurs, to be invented as I go along, improvised as I groan along. I'll laugh. That's how it will end, in a chuckle, chuck, chuck, oh, ha, pa. I'll practice num, hoo, la, pss. Nothing but emotion. Bing, bang. That's blows. Ugh, hoo. What else? Ooh, ah, that's love. Enough. It's tiring. Hee hee. That's the Abderite. No, the other. In the end. It's the end, the ending end. It's the silence, a few gurgles on the silence, the real silence. Not the one where I macerate up to the mouth, up to the ear, that covers me, uncovers me, breathes with me like a cat with a mouse. That of the drowned, I've drowned more than once. It wasn't I. Suffocated, set fire to me, thumped on my head with wood and iron. It wasn't I. There was no head, no wood, no iron. I didn't do anything to me. I didn't do anything to anyone. No one did anything to me. There is no one. I've looked. No one but me. No, not me either. I've looked everywhere. There must be someone. The voice must belong to someone. I've no objection. What it wants, I want. I am it. I've said so. It says so. From time to time, it says so. Then it says not. I've no objection. I want it to go silent. It wants to go silent. It can't. It does for a second. Then it starts again. That's not the real silence. It says that's not the real silence. What can be said of the real silence? I don't know. That I don't know what it is. There is no such thing. That perhaps there is such a thing. Yes. That perhaps there is somewhere. I'll never know. But when it falters and when it stops, but it falters every instant. It stops every instant. Yes, but when it stops for a good few moments, a good few moments. What are a good few moments? What then? Murmurs. Then it must be murmurs. And listening. Someone listening. No need of an ear. No need of a mouth. The voice listens, as when it speaks, listens to its silence, that makes a murmur, that makes a voice, a small voice, the same voice, only small. It sticks in the throat. There's the throat again. There's the mouth again. It fills the ear. There's the ear again. Then I vomit. Someone vomits. Someone starts vomiting again. That must be how it happens. I have no explanations to offer, none to demand. The comma will come where I drown for good. Then the silence. I believe it this evening, still this evening, how it drags on. I've no objection. Perhaps it's springtime. Violets, no, that's autumn. There's a time for everything, for the things that pass, the things that end. They could never get me to understand that. The things that stir, depart, return, a light changing, they could never get me to see that. And death into the bargain, a voice dying. That's a good one. Silence at last. Not a murmur, no air, no one listening, not for the likes of me. Amen. On we go. Enormous prison, like 100,000 cathedrals. Never anything else anymore. From this time forth, and in it, somewhere, perhaps, riveted, tiny, the prisoner. How can he be found? How false this space is. What falseness instantly to want to draw that round you, to want to put a being there. A cell would be plenty. If I gave up, if only I could give up, before beginning again. What breathlessness. That's right. Ejaculations that helps you on, that puts off the fatal hour. No, the reverse. I don't know. Start again. In this immensity, this obscurity, go through the motions of starting again. You who can't stir, you who never started, you the who, go through the motions. What motions? You can't stir. You launch your voice. It dies away in the vault. It calls that a vault. Perhaps it's the abyss. Those are words. It speaks of a prison. I've no objection. Vast enough for a whole people, for me alone, or waiting for me. I'll go there now. I'll try and go there now. I can't stir. I'm there already. I must be there already. Perhaps I'm not alone. Perhaps a whole people is here, and the voice, its voice, coming to me fitfully. We would have lived, been free for a moment. Now we talk about it, each one to himself, each one out loud for himself. And we listen, a whole people, talking and listening, all together. That would X know I am alone, perhaps the first, or perhaps the last, talking alone, listening alone, alone, alone. The others are gone. They have been stilled, their voices stilled, their listening stilled. One by one, at each new coming, another will come. I won't be the last. I'll be with the others. I'll be as gone in the silence. It won't be I. It's not I. I'm not there yet. I'll go there now. I'll try to go there now. No use trying. I wait for my turn to go there, my turn to talk there, my turn to listen there, my turn to wait there for my turn to go, to be as gone. It's unending. It will be unending. Gone where? Where do you go from there? You must go somewhere else. Wait somewhere else for your turn to go again, and so on, a whole people, or I am alone, and come back, and begin again. No, go on again. It's a circuit, a long circuit. I know it well. I must know it well. It's a lie. I can't stir. I haven't stirred. I launch the voice. I hear a voice. There is nowhere but here. There are not two places. There are not two prisons. It's my parlor. It's a parlor where I wait for nothing. I don't know where it is. I don't know what it's like. That's no business of mine. I don't know if it's big, or if it's small, or if it's closed, if it's open. That's right. Reiterate. That helps you on. Open on what? There is nothing else. Only it. Open on the void. Open on the nothing. I've no objection. Those are words. Open on the silence. Looking out on the silence. Straight out. Why not? All this time, on the brink of silence, I knew it. On a rock, lashed to a rock in the midst of silence. Its great swell rears towards me. I'm streaming with it. It's an image. Those are words. It's a body. It's not I. I knew it wouldn't be I. I'm not outside. I'm inside. I'm in something. I'm shut up. The silence is outside. Outside. Inside. There is nothing but here. And the silence outside. Nothing but this voice and the silence all around. No need of walls. Yes, we must have walls. I need walls, good and thick. I need a prison. I was right. For me alone. I'll go there now. I'll put me in it. I'm there already. I'll start looking for me now. I'm there somewhere. It won't be I. No matter. I'll say it's I. Perhaps it will be I. Perhaps that's all they're waiting for. There they are again, to give me quittance, waiting for me to say I'm someone, to say I'm somewhere, to put me out into the silence. I see nothing. It's because there is nothing, or it's because I have no eyes, or both. That makes 3 possibilities to choose from. But do I really see nothing? It's not the moment to tell a lie. But how can you not tell a lie? What an idea, a voice like this. Who can check it? It tries everything. It's blind. It seeks me blindly. In the dark, it seeks a mouth to enter into. Who can query it? There is no other. You'd need a head. You'd need things I don't know. I look too often as if I knew. It's the voice does that. It goes all-knowing to make me think I know, to make me think it's mine. It has no interest in eyes. It says I have none, or that they are no use to me. Then it speaks of tears. Then it speaks of gleams. It is truly at a loss. Gleams, yes, far or near. Distances, you know, measurements, enough said. Gleams, as at dawn, then dying, as at evening, or flaring up. They do that too, blaze up more dazzling than snow. For a second, that's short, then fizzle out. That's true enough, if you like. One forgets. I forget. I say I see nothing, or I say it's all in my head, as if I felt a head on me. That's all hypotheses, lies. These gleams too, they were to save me. They were to devour me. That came to nothing. I see nothing, either because of this or else on account of that. And these images at which they watered me like a camel before the desert, I don't know, more lies just for the fun of it. Fun, what fun we've had. What fun of it. All lies. That's soon said. You must say soon. It's the regulations. The place, I'll make it all the same. I'll make it in my head. I'll draw it out of my memory. I'll gather it all about me. I'll make myself a head. I'll make myself a memory. I have only to listen. The voice will tell me everything. Tell it to me again. Everything I need, in dribs and drabs, breathless. It's like a confession, a last confession. You think it's finished, then it starts off again. There were so many sins. The memory is so bad. The words don't come. The words fail. The breath fails. No, it's something else. It's an indictment. A dying voice accusing me. You must accuse someone. A culprit is indispensable. It speaks of my sins. It speaks of my head. It says it's mine. It says that I repent, that I want to be punished better than I am, that I want to go, give myself up. A victim is essential. I have only to listen. It will show me my hiding place, what it's like, where the door is, if there's a door, and whereabouts I am in it, and what lies between us, how the land lies, what kind of country, whether it's sea or whether it's mountain, and the way to take so that I may go, make my escape, give myself up, come to the place where the axe falls without further ceremony on all who come from here. I'm not the first. I won't be the first. It will best me in the end. It has bested better than me. It will tell me what to do in order to rise, move, act like a body endowed with despair. That's how I reason. That's how I hear myself reasoning. All lies. It's not me they're calling, not me they're talking about. It's not yet my turn, it's someone else's turn. That's why I can't stir. That's why I don't feel a body on me. I'm not suffering enough yet. It's not my turn. Not suffering enough to be able to stir, to have a body complete with head, to be able to understand, to have eyes to light the way. I merely hear without understanding, without being able to profit by it. What I hear, to do what, to rise and go and be done with hearing. I don't hear everything. That must be it. The important things escape me. It's not my turn. The topographical and anatomical information in particular is lost on me. No, I hear everything. What difference does it make? The moment it's not my turn to understand, my turn to live, my turn of the life screw. It calls that living. The space of the way from here to the door, it's all there in what I hear, somewhere. If it has been said all this long time, all must have been said, but it's not my turn to know what I am, where I am, and what I should do to stop being it, to stop being there. That's coherent, so as to be another, no, the same, I don't know. Depart into life, travel the road, find the door, find the axe. Perhaps it's a cord for the neck, for the throat, for the cords, or fingers. I'll have eyes, I'll see fingers. It will be the silence. Perhaps it's a drop. Find the door, open the door, drop into the silence. It won't be I. I'll stay here or there, more likely there. It will never be I. That's all I know. It's all been done already. Said and said again. The departure, the body that rises, the way, in color, the arrival, the door that opens, closes again. It was never I. I've never stirred. I've listened. I must have spoken. Why deny it? Why not admit it? After all, I deny nothing. I admit nothing. I say what I hear. I hear what I say. I don't know. One or the other, or both. That makes 3 possibilities. Pick your fancy. All these stories about travelers, these stories about paralytics, all are mine. I must be extremely old, or it's memory playing tricks. If only I knew if I've lived, if I live, if I'll live, that would simplify everything. Impossible to find out. That's where you're buggered. I haven't stirred. That's all I know. No, I know something else. It's not I. I always forget that. I resume. You must resume. Never stirred from here. Never stopped telling stories. To myself. Hardly hearing them. Hearing something else. Listening for something else. Wondering now and then where I got them from. Was I in the land of the living? Were they in mine, and where? Where do I store them? In my head? I don't feel a head on me. What do I tell them with? With my mouth? Same remark. What do I hear them with? And so on, the old rigmarole. It can't be I, or it's because I pay no heed. It's such an old habit. I do it without heeding, or as if I were somewhere else. There I am far again. There I am the absentee again. It's his turn again now. He who neither speaks nor listens, who has neither body nor soul. It's something else he has. He must have something. He must be somewhere. He is made of silence. There's a pretty analysis. He's in the silence. He's the one to be sought, the one to be spoken of, the one to speak, but he can't speak. Then I could stop. I'd be he. I'd be the silence. I'd be back in the silence. We'd be reunited. His story, the story to be told. But he has no story. He hasn't been in story. It's not certain. He's in his own story. Unimaginable. Unspeakable. That doesn't matter. The attempt must be made. In the old stories, incomprehensibly mine, to find his, it must be there somewhere. It must have been mine. Before being his, I'll recognize it. In the end, I'll recognize it. In the story of the silence that he never left, that I should never have left, that I may never find again, that I may find again. Then it will be he, it will be I, it will be the place, the silence, the end, the beginning again. How can I say it? That's all words. They're all I have, and not many of them. The words fail, the voice fails, so be it. I know that well. It will be the silence, full of murmurs, distant cries, the usual silence, spent listening, spent waiting, waiting for the voice. The cries abate, like all cries. That is to say, they stop. The murmurs cease. They give up. The voice begins again. It begins trying again. Quick, now, before there is none left. No voice left. Nothing left but the core of murmurs, distant cries. Quick now, and try again with the words that remain. Try what? I don't know. I've forgotten. It doesn't matter. I never knew. To have them carry me into my story, the words that remain, my old story, which I've forgotten, far from here, through the noise, through the door, into the silence. That must be it. It's too late. Perhaps it's too late. Perhaps they have. Now, how would I know? In the silence, you don't know. Perhaps it's the door. Perhaps I'm at the door. That would surprise me. Perhaps it's I. Perhaps somewhere or other it was I. I can depart. All this time I've journeyed without knowing it. It's I now at the door. What door? What's a door doing here? It's the last words, the true last, or it's the murmurs. The murmurs are coming. I know that well. No, not even that. You talk of murmurs, distant cries, as long as you can talk. You talk of them before, and you talk of them after. More lies. It will be the silence. The one that doesn't last, spent listening, spent waiting for it to be broken, for the voice to break it. Perhaps there's no other. I don't know. It's not worth having. That's all I know. It's not I. That's all I know. It's not mine. It's the only one I ever had. That's a lie. I must have had the other, the one that lasts, but it didn't last. I don't understand. That is to say, it did. It still lasts. I'm still in it. I left myself behind in it. I'm waiting for me there. No, there you don't wait. You don't listen. I don't know. Perhaps it's a dream, all a dream. That would surprise me. I'll wake in the silence and never sleep again. It will be I, or dream again. Dream of a silence, a dream silence, full of murmurs. I don't know. That's all words. Never wake. All words. There's nothing else. You must go on. That's all I know. They're going to stop. I know that well. I can feel it. They're going to abandon me. It will be the silence, for a moment, a good few moments, or it will be mine, the lasting one, that didn't last, that still lasts. It will be I. You must go on. I can't go on. You must go on. I'll go on. You must say words, as long as there are any, until they find me, until they say me. Strange pain, strange sin. You must go on. Perhaps it's done already. Perhaps they have said me already. Perhaps they have carried me to the threshold of my story, before the door that opens on my story. That would surprise me. If it opens, it will be I. It will be the silence, where I am. I don't know. I'll never know. In the silence, you don't know. You must go on. I can't go on. I'll go on. Okay, so about the author. Samuel Beckett was born in Dublin in 1906. He was educated at Portola Royal School and Trinity College, Dublin, where he graduated in 1927. He made his poetry debut in 1930 with Horoscope and followed with essays and 2 novels before World War II. During the war, he was in France and participated in the French Resistance. He wrote one of his most famous plays, Waiting for Godot, in 1949, but it wasn't published in English until 1954. Waiting for Godot brought Beckett international fame and firmly established himself as a leading figure in the theater of the absurd. He received the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1961. Beckett continued to write prolifically for radio, TV, and theater until his death in 1989. Okay, so if you get a chance, if you're in New York, go see Waiting for Godot on Broadway with Keanu Reeves and Alec Winters. And if you get a chance to see Krapp's Last Tape or the Endgame, all great. And I hope you got something out of reading this together. And we'll look at comments in the comments thread, and I'll continue responding to you. Let me know how it went. And until next time, we'll have a be healthy, be well, stay warm. And so this has been Greg Mona, a.k.a. Master Moo. And this has been Art is the Church of God the Creator. See you soon.